So today should be a little bit of fun. Because
You're looking forward to this one, you said.
I look forward to this. These are all things that actually surprise me. Some of you may know some of these. I didn't know most of these. We often think of science being at odds with our faith, Christianity, and nothing can be further from the truth. That's what we're told, but it simply is not true. And I'm a scientist. I love science, and seeing how much science our faith is actually based on is great encouragement to me. So let's start with a song. This is Be All Right, and then we'll start our lesson and gives Joy a chance to catch up. Let's go ahead and start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time together again to share all the amazing things that you have provided us with and take the message from this song that no matter what's going on, it'll be all right. No matter what we face in life, it'll be all right because you're in charge and we can trust you, and that's all that really matters. And I pray these things in your name, Lord Jesus. Amen. All right, so we've been working our way through our Christian worldview, and if you've noticed, I've used almost no Bible to prove Christianity. Our worldview is based on evidence beyond just the Bible. The Bible is kind of the carrot on the top, right? It's the cherry. It's what gives us so much encouragement. But you can see everything you need to know about God, truth, evil from the world around us. And we're going to look at the last kind of puzzle. We've touched on it in some of the other sessions, but science. And like I said, I love science because, well, that's what I am. I'm a scientist. But before we get started, I've taken a little bit of a beating on the internet, because we post these, right, about my credentials as a non-science person. So for those of you that may not know, I actually am a real scientist and engineer. But I've loved science since I was a little kid. I always liked to see nature and figure out how it works. I took things apart. That was just kind of my thing. I could put them back together, so it's a good thing. But I started working in research labs when I was a sophomore in college, and worked all the way through. Got my PhD in chemical engineering. And I worked on both the atomic level systems, where we were putting a single layer of atoms on materials for NASA, to integrating technologies for here on Earth. And obviously I work in the oil and gas industry now. I've been an engineer for 25 years in the oil and gas industry. I have a professional engineering license in the state of Texas. So I am a real scientist and engineer. I'm also a Christian. And those are not in conflict in any way in anything that I do. Yet, people will say it is. And people will say, and they've accused me, it's like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I showed a few of my textbooks today, because I have a lot of chemistry background. I have a couple of bookcases full of textbooks that I have personally had to read and study and use in my professional. That does not make me an expert in any way. So I also have a theology degree, as you guys know. I got one this year. I got a master's and doctorate in theology. So I both have science and theology, and it's not in conflict in any way. So for those people that care about credentials, I have some credentials, but credentials are not important to have this conversation. There's nothing that we've talked about that you need a credential to understand. It's just, if they need credentials, then okay, that's the purpose in me getting the credentials in the first place. So I think the focus, and I think the focus of everyone should be application of knowledge, not just knowing things to know them. And too often, especially on the internet, people want to show you that they're right. And their rightness is somehow going to trump what righteousness is. Being right even if you're wrong is kind of the... But as a scientist, if you're really going to do science, you have to let the evidence lead you wherever it goes. Truth is what you're in search of. That's what science is. That's the reason science came out of Christianity. It's the search for the truth, the search for how God has done this amazing thing which is our world and us and the entire cosmos. So I think the one constant, though, that we always struggle with across every discipline, doesn't matter what your discipline is people disagree and interpret things differently. There's not a consensus really in any field of study. And I think that's okay. The important thing is to understand that everybody has the same burden of proof for whatever their opinion is. Many say to us that there's no God. I really think our response should be, what's your evidence of that? We're too quick to try to defend our faith, and we should be able to defend our faith, but we should keep the burden of proof on the person making the claim. If they say no God, then okay, what is your evidence? I'll show you mine, and then let's see whose evidence makes more sense. They'll say the Bible is not reliable, and we've talked about that, but I think our first response, instead of trying to defend the Bible so hard, should be, why? Why do you think that? What is your evidence for that? I'll show you mine, but you show me yours. You're the one who made the claim. And I think if we took that tact and used the cumulative scientific approach that everybody wants to use, we have an opportunity to show that their opinions actually are not as reasonable as our Christian faith. And I think we've walked through that, or tried to walk through that, over and over again. And the classic argument we talked about a few weeks ago was, if you can't test it, observe it, then it's not real. It's a scientific method, right? Well, science itself can't be tested that way. It has to presuppose all these other things that are not testable, like mathematics themselves, like logic, like reason, like the laws of nature that everybody takes for granted, our consciousness. We take all these things for granted, and the scientists do as well, but it's not science. It's actually beyond science. And I think when we allow them to take the intangible things for granted, we kind of allow them to take an advantage over us. We need to point out that they're taking credit for the intangibles. So science is not what everything is about. I'm a scientist. I can say that engineering, we can make things work, but there's things beyond that science and technology cannot and will never be able to explain. And that's kind of where Christianity comes in. People say Jesus is not God. Well, then the question is, who is he? He's not God. C.S. Lewis said it perfectly. He's either a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. There's no middle ground. You have to choose. And when people challenge, you need to, it's like, okay, so who was he? And why do you say that? And then most people may have something to come back. But then we have our opportunity to guide them and show them what evidence we have. I don't think we want to be first in to always want to defend ourselves. Keep the burden of proof equal, and then the conversations tend to come from that. So today we're going to talk about science, and specifically I want to talk about the hidden science in the Bible. Did you guys know there was hidden science in the Bible? I never had put it this way. J. Warner Wallace put it this way, and I was shocked at what I found. And we're also going to look at some archaeology, which again is another science that supports the Bible. Two things to remember as we go through. Why are there no archaeological finds that disprove the Bible? Well, that's something the skeptics have to answer for. Skeptics will often say there's no evidence the Bible is true. Well, in case after case, evidence is eventually found. And the Christian, we should really say, Christian knows that the lack of evidence is not evidence at all, but rather the evidence yet to be found. And as far as I know, I've never seen an archaeological find that disproves any story in the Bible. In fact, they always approve of the stories. There have been some cases where archaeologists have gone out with an agenda to disprove the Bible, and they basically don't look very hard. And someone comes in after them in the exact same place and finds the evidence needed to support the Bible. We're going to talk about some of that as we go along today. So any kind of questions, comments before we get rolling? So I wanted to show you a slide of just a few of the sciences that I identified in the Bible. And you could add a lot more. This is far from being complete. The point is, the Bible describes aspects of these sciences, or almost the foundations of these sciences, thousands of years before the modern science was even thought of by the people that practice it today. And there are going to be doubters who are going to say, you know, this isn't true, right? But we can point out phrases in our Bible that were not only an exception to the rule. No other ancient manuscript describes it this way, or actually will describe it the opposite way. Flat Earth is going to be one of those. Every other ancient manuscript describes the Earth as flat, except for this, our Bible. Which one was right? So we're going to just touch on a few of these. And some of these are going to be kind of fun. So I'm going to start with, my kids made me add a couple of things yesterday, so we'll see how this goes. The first is paleontology. I'm sure you guys recognize that dinosaurs are in the Bible, right? Right in there in Job, it says, "Look at the behemoth, which I have made along with you, which feeds on the grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in its muscles in its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar. Its sinews of its thighs are close knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze, and limbs are like rods of iron. It ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with his sword. Hills bring it their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus plants it lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. The lotus conceal it in their shadows. The poplars of the stream surround it. A raging river does not alarm it. It is secure. Though the Jordan should surge against its mouth, can anyone capture it by the eyes and trap it and pierce its nose? That's Job chapter 40, verses 15 to 24. Anybody guess what it might be? We don't know, but I got a pretty good guess. Want to see my guess? Brachiosaurus. This is from Jurassic Park. Now you tell me, when you see the tail swinging back and forth, does that look like a cedar? Well, look at that. I mean, well, yeah, some people say rhinoceros. Interesting thing about Brachiosaurus, and there are a lot of these, what they call sauropod dinosaurs. They're huge for starters. Their tails are long, their necks are long. But the interesting thing is their bones. And I'm going to show you a picture in a second. I want to show you another quick clip. So just kind of look at the muscles as this movie depicts it, which are based on actually the way the bones are designed. See the strength of its loins. That's the stomach muscles of the animal when it rears up here. Now, obviously, we can't guarantee this is exactly what a Brachiosaurus looks like, but it's a very good depiction. Another part, which I thought was interesting in the movie's depiction of this, was this huge land animal, and it says it hides under lotus flowers. That's kind of a weird thing. Well, oops, I screwed it up, of course. And see, from all accounts from the scientists' world, we believe these were animals that spent a lot of their life in the water. So obviously they could hide in the streams, in the shadow of the lotus. They could be concealed. The depiction in the Bible is very, very close. But when you start looking at the science of these creatures from what we have, they've done CT scans of the bones. You see a man here standing next to one of the legs that they've found. The density of the bones of the Brachiosaurus it's like 90% more dense than human bones. That shows you how big and heavy they were. They can see the marks from where the muscles attach in different parts of the body and the underbelly of these creatures and in their thighs. Incredibly dense muscles. We can see that from the bones. Again, is this the behemoth? Well, it could be. My children wanted me to add the next one. The Leviathan. I don't know if the Leviathan is often thought to be a dragon. Some people say a hippo. But let me just read it. So this is out of Job 41. And it says, "Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook?" Now I'll skip a few verses, and it says, "Can you fill its hide with harpoons, or its head with fishing spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and will never do it again." Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Now I'll skip a few more verses, and it goes, "Everything under heaven belongs to me. I will not fail to speak to the Leviathan's limbs, its strength and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double-coated armor? Who dares open the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together." So what could this be? They talk about a dragon, an armadillo. Let me show you one possibility of what the Leviathan should look like, or could look like. The mosasaur. They just found a skeleton of the largest one ever found in Scotland. There was a big land along the seashore, a big cliff fell down, and the mouth of the one they found was, I think they said 6 feet across, like 8 feet long. That's the mouth. So, well, I'm not sure that this depiction of the mosasaurus is accurate. You can see where Leviathan, whatever it might have been, it could be something like this. And more importantly, God created things that would have matched this description. Now, there's two things of the Leviathan that people always argue about, and it says that light comes from its eyes and smoke from its nostrils. But if you've ever been around sea mammals, the mosasaur was thought to have been nocturnal. So if you shine a light into an animal that has an eye this big, what comes back at you? A beam of light out of the eye. And when a air-breathing sea creature breathes, what do you see? You see what looks to be smoke, right, out of its nostrils. So you can get the description out of Job, out of.
Some of those things that live very, very deep in the water, they glow.
Yeah.
They have light on them.
So
they can't explain why it has it.
I have no idea if this is really the Leviathan, but I can say for sure something like this can match that description. To say that, it's a mythical creature, the Bible's only made of myths, probably not. It could be, but more likely God is describing a specific creature, a behemoth, probably a giant dinosaur, and the Leviathan, probably an ancient water creature of immense size. Oh, yeah. Well, they came as eggs. You didn't have to say a full-grown one. That's for later in the story. So, yeah, these stories in Job, our paleontology has discovered creatures that actually match these descriptions in the Bible. And I every time I see one of these, it's like I look at these descriptions in the Bible, it's like, yeah, those descriptions actually are pretty accurate to what these creatures most likely look like. Another amazing one is oceanography in the Bible. The valleys of the seas are exposed and the foundations of the earth. That's Psalm 18:15. Why is that exciting? Well, before about 1500s or so, everybody thought the ocean was like a bowl. It would slowly slope off, and there was a sandy bottom called the abyssal plain. We still call it the abyssal plain in science. And that's what people thought the ocean was. There was no geographic features in the ocean. But what year was it? This is the Marianas Trench, just off of the Philippines, actually, off of Guam. It's the deepest part of the earth. And you can see it doesn't look very flat. Does it look like a valley of the sea? Yet modern man had no idea about this. And I guarantee David, who wrote the psalm, had no idea about this. But obviously God did. What could have possibly given him such an idea other than God? And like I said, we didn't discover that there was any topography in the oceans until the 1500s, when they started being able to dive more than a couple hundred feet. So 2,500 years before we discovered it, God already knew it and recorded it in our Bibles. Another one, which is interesting, this kind of goes back to the Genesis flood story, Genesis 7:11. And it says, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of heaven were open. That is a spring of fresh water in the ocean. Until 1977, everybody thought this was just hocus in the Bible, until they discovered the first freshwater spring off the coast of Ecuador, 1977. We didn't know this. Everybody thought, this was just figurative language. It turns out God was right again, and it took us until 40 some years ago to discover it for ourselves. So it's accurately depicted in the Bible, totally against science until just 40 years ago. This is another hot spring near the Marianas Trench, and it's like, have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? That's again out of Job 30, verse 16. So multiple places in the Bible are talking about springs of water in the ocean. Yet again, we didn't know this until the late 70s. The recesses of the deep. Again, this is Job. Job is thought to be the oldest book in the Bible. We don't know when the copies were written, but I believe the oral tradition predates Moses. And maybe these are even stories that predate Noah and were passed down by Noah. That's the common scholarship. So 6,000 years ago, people knew this, and science, our modern science, just caught up to it a few years ago. Another oceanography one's in Jonah. And I missed this in the Jonah story. And it says, you hurled me into the depths, he's talking to God, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled around me, and all your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I've been banished from your sight, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. At the deep, and the deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever, but you, Lord, my God, brought me my life up from the pit. So what's he talking about? Roots of mountains in the middle of the ocean. Again, we're talking about ocean topography. And it wasn't until, let's see if I can find the actual date so I don't speak out. But we know things like this today. This is the Pacific Ocean topography. It's anything but flat. The roots of the mountains are in the ocean. Another one that comes out of Job is, have you journeyed to the springs of the seas and walked among the recesses of the deep. We talked about that scripture just a second ago, but this is the Atlantic Ocean. There's a mountain range right down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Did you guys know that? The tallest mountains in the world are right there. It's not Everest. They're actually under the ocean in the Atlantic Ocean. Very cool, huh? Again, Bible way ahead of its time. Even in 2 Samuel, chapter 22, verse 16 says this, the valleys of the sea were exposed and the foundations of the earth laid bare at the rebuke of the Lord, at the blast of breath from his nostrils. I mean, how in the world would Samuel have known that? Of course, it's not Samuel writing this particular book, but you're talking about sea valleys in a time where everybody thought it was just a big bowl. Now that's science in the Bible that's hidden in the Bible that unless you know to look for it, you just kind of read over it and it's like, oh yeah, but no, this is remarkable scientific content long before it was ever discovered by modern man. Now the Bible is not a science book. Now don't get me wrong as we go through this. It's not intended to be a science book. But when the Bible talks about science, it's always correct. We haven't found anything that it doesn't support. Now, what does that say? Modern science has not found anything that the Bible talks about. I mean, there's some poetic things maybe that you might be able to argue about, but we all know they're poems, so come on.